From deep within our hidden volcano laboratory, a podcast about gaming from the people who bring your games to life. These are your core elements.
Core Elements, episode 56, recorded on January 9th, 2013.
I am Wes Wilson.
I'm Spencer Williams, and with us is Lorne Lanning. I'm very excited to say hello. Hey, say hello, Lorne.
Hey, everyone. Great to be here, guys. Spencer and Wes, been looking forward to this.
Lorne is most well known for being ubiquitous, but his primary claim to fame is the Oddworld series. And you've been working on that since when?
Well, we started the company in '94, and I really started plotting the way, building the business plan, building at least a high level idea of design, and with my partner Sherry McKenna. And so in '92, that really was a selective focus of must start game company, and then it took till '94 to convince her and other people, and wait for the right timing and that we had the right chess pieces in our, on our side of the board that actually added up to being able to get the money back then. So that's quite a while.
And you've gotten, even the first thing you guys came out with had some incredible critical praise. That doesn't happen very often.
Thanks. And we did well out of the gate. And so some of it was a surprise, people often ask, did you expect that success? And I was like, if you were getting the money, you had to have a damn good argument that you were going to be successful, or no one was just generously giving away to wannabe game designers, right? And but what was interesting was we didn't really come out of the industry at all. We jumped from film, and coming from, in particular, computer animated 3D special effects out of Hollywood. And then some of your listeners might know Rhythm and Hue Studios, which is where Sherry and I had started working together. And but sort of coming from aerospace, seeing what was happening in 3D CG in Hollywood, largely in commercials and somewhat at that time in motion pictures. Look how far that's come, right? In the beginning, we were arguing like you shouldn't use a plane model, you should use CG. That was huge battles back in the day. But seeing where all this was headed, it was very obvious to me that video games were just a massive part of the globe's future, and that they would be connecting people more. So I really got interested in that, pursuing it there. But in saying that, we didn't really approach it the way a lot of other development companies that had been conditioned by the industry by that time, had experience, basically. We were looking at more like, hey, we want to make more PG games. We want to make more, PG-13. We want to integrate story more. We want to integrate graphics and world more. We want to do these things a little more than what we're seeing, and we want to do it with a bizarre twist. So in the beginning, when I was pitching that concept, and not to studios, it was more sort of venture capitalist class, more financial investor class. Probably because they didn't know much about games as much as they thought there was going to be a lot of money there. Our story of like a third world, meat factory slave laborer who was going to wind up chopped up as his retirement plan, wasn't necessarily what a big publisher would have thought was like, that'll sell, yeah, let's go compete with Mario. So, it was interesting times. And I've been told a lot since then. From people, from other owners of companies and stuff. In hindsight, they go, the thing that really stood out with Abe was just how different it was, and from a lot of things that were out there then. And I think a lot of that had to do with that sort of isolation of not knowing the industry that well and just looking at it fresh as a gamer, but not as a gamer creative artist, looking at games as like, what's going to make games more interesting in the way that I would see more interesting for games. And so because of that unique start coming in from that slightly different, segue out of film storytelling, it just registered with, it made perfect sense to us to do, but it was kind of a surprise for other people. And of course, we really got the money being experts in 3D at the time, is 3D CG. And the game industry knew that it had to start going that way. I mean, when we were, 3DO had come out, Trip Hawkins had announced it, and PlayStation had not yet come out yet. But everyone knew that they had to start upping their game into 3D graphics. So that was a big part of our being able to sort of leverage the business plan and start a gaming company. And in doing that, we then, of course, made a 2.5D game.
Right. And of course, let's see, Abe's Odyssey had some fantastic cutscenes in it. Like, it had that great intro, and it was just highly, highly entertaining. And I'm wondering if you've heard, like, these guys that say cutscenes are terrible and there should never, ever be cutscenes.
Well, I had it in my own team, right? Because when we started the company, and I think it's a valid perspective, but not all encompassing, right? So when we started Oddworld, really about half the team was coming more from conventional visual effects and entertainment, and the other half of the team was coming from more conventional games. And of course, the visual effects people wanted to see more storytelling, and the game people were like, you guys don't get it, it's all about challenge. And I was just looking at this like a new type of gene splicing. Like, we just had to find better ways to integrate the two. So there was strong arguments of people saying, look, the game, for instance, and this even got to the platform level where there was what do you call when you go through your specs? You're all in compliance, particularly with your button schemes and stuff. One of the specs was that you had to be able to allow the bypassing of movies, and I just absolutely forbid it. I said only after you see it the first time.
Yeah.
But if you start doing that, then we have to design a game where the information can't be embedded in the movie, and that is exactly not the type of game that we're making. We're making it where we're going to synergize the two, where when you watch the story, you're going to be more informed of what's coming next, that you have to at least watch it once because it is a story. If you don't get the story context, then you're going to be judging the game independent of story, and then you're out of line, and you can do that in a lot of games, but not in this game. So there was all these arguments and all these battles back then, just about simple things like, a hardcore gamer on staff just going, I hate game stories, and I want to be able to bypass them anytime I'm seeing them. And I'm going, not in this game. Not in this game. Well, that's stupid. I hate games like that. Well, you're going to hate this game anyway if you bypass the movies and you don't know how to play it and you're not getting the hints, so don't play the damn game, it was really like kind of knock down, drag out like that sometimes. But really, and I don't do this as a ding to anyone else that's making games or what the state of.
I hear you. I hear you. We know what you're saying.
But at the time, people just weren't putting that much. The movies seemed to be an additive thing to a game. They didn't seem to be something that was, really driven at the spine of enhancing the experience as much as. And not enough care and attention was really being paid, I think, to animation expressive qualities, making characters that you care about, right? Like, very simple thing. And so, the battles I've had over the years of arguing, I said, look, game players go to movies too, right? Like, they actually like good movies. What a surprise. But they actually do. And there's a reason for that. And they don't like shitty movies. And if you make shitty movies, no wonder they all want to go past it. Sorry on the explicits there.
That's all right.
But it was like, come on, guys. Yeah. No one wants to watch a crappy movie.
Yeah.
Duh. So I have a really unique idea. Let's not make crappy movies. Let's synergize this better. So after the knocking down and dragging out and all that, and getting my way eventually, it proved in the marketplace. People liked it. And so we stuck to a certain formula of, we don't want you to have to wade through things a bunch of times. And that's at an experiential level, as a UX target. So, this is one of the reasons why, we blew some of our save feature stuff on the first game, no mistake. We had difficulties there, and we learned from it and tried to get a lot better from that point forward. But point being is that we didn't want you to have to repeat a whole long section because you hadn't beaten it all in 3 tries or 5 tries. You know, we wanted to be like, as long as you were persistent, you would have steady progress. Yeah. And even if you hit a certain point and you failed 200 times, we didn't want to make you go back and have to replay. And that was kind of a common paradigm at the time, that you were being forced to replay a lot of areas of games. And I felt that was just taking away my interest in any particular game. You know, it was increasing the boredom factor. So while we were trying not to do that, at the same time, we were trying to force you to engage these movies a little more. But once you had gotten past them once, we didn't want you to have to watch it again. So then we would put in the bypass. But like I said, you know, even that, defining it that way was still, you know, there was still plenty of argument.
Yeah.
So basically you're saying you're like George Lucas with the credits at the beginning of the movie. Comparing yourself to George Lucas, aren't you?
No, not at all. Nor did I get sued by the Directors Guild, which he did. You know, he got sued for that move. I don't know if you knew that. You probably did if you mentioned it. Sorry.
So how do you feel like, do you think that's like a defining characteristic of a lot of your company's like interactions with the gaming industry, is that you have a vision and then you have to fight against existing standards or existing power structures in order to take this vision that you have and make it into some kind of reality?
You know, I think there's a few different slices to that, right? You know, different categories of it. One is creatively, we always had control. It was never like cooperative developments, you know. And so in the one respect, creatively, we had that control. We didn't have people telling us to change colors, change the name of characters, do this, do that. But on the other hand, you had the realities of what happens when you start being successful in a stable that's a public company. Like, for instance, you know, so at the time when Abe came out, that was GT Interactive Software, was a new publisher. You know, really, they were really trying to sort of come on the scene and just be big fast. And they had a lot of power behind them, a lot of money behind them. If you remember, if you were EA, you had to go through GT to get into Walmart. Like, that's how GT got started. It was really clever stuff. But everyone had to basically pay GT to distribute in Walmart until Walmart figured out the gaming business. So it was an interesting time. But all that being said, directly to your point is, once we proved successful, Abe came out in that year, and in a pretty short amount of time, it sold you know, over 3.5 million units. And so that was great. And but what you did was all of a sudden other games shipped late, you know, so Unreal Tournament was missing Christmas or things like that, right? And they're also in the stable of a public company. So I think Doom was distributing at that time through GT, Epic, a number of other people. And what happened was that we had planned on really going to 3D sooner, and then we were politely, you know, part of a family, right? So they're like, guys, you were a hit. This is awesome. We need another one in 9 months. And you're like, wow, okay. One of those curses of success. So after, you know, lots of bitching and moaning, you know, it was like, just do it. Use that same engine. I was like, that engine almost just killed me. You know, like, it's not really an engine. It's more of a demo, you know, that somehow made it into a final game. But, you know, yeah. So we had all these dilemmas about, you know, Abe. In many ways, when we built Abe's Odyssey, it was we were feeling it out along the way. And it's not the way you really want to build games. You know, you can burn extra time that way. But it was aiming for an experience that we hadn't quite felt before. And as an inexperienced game designer at the time, so I would say, like, I was very excited, ambitiously and creatively, and constantly being humbled by the reality of you know, what chipsets would do. And I thought, coming in from Hollywood compared to those guys, I had a really good, humbling sort of viewpoint of, like, this is magic that these guys were releasing on the Sega Genesis, right? And I was like totally blown away. I mean, I was like, you know, trying to get in with like guys down at Virgin Games, and I was still in film. And I'd be like, hey, I work at Rhythm and Hughes. And they were like, oh, Rhythm and Hughes, you want to come down here? You know, and I'd be like, yeah, I want to come down to your game studio. And then that's how I got to meet people like, you know, Tommy Talarico and Dave Perry and people that were actually in there in games. And they were showing me the things that they were working on. And this was Genesis days, right? And I was just like, wow, these guys are magicians, man. I mean, I was just blown away. You know, and in CG, I mean, we were rendering, we were doing motion pictures and stuff, really high resolution, film resolution, designing, new matte painting systems, things like that to be digital. And so in many ways, the film industry was still very snobby about games, right? They were like, well, they don't look that great, or we could do better graphics. And I was like, you don't understand, man. These dudes are doing 56K of memory or 128K of memory. They're creating a 40-hour entertainment experience. We're charging $1 million a minute currently. And so maybe we have something to learn here. And I was really aggressive about figuring that ratio out. I was like, and just being a student of evolution, and particularly evolution of technology, in particular evolution of military technology through the ages, through our history, it was very obvious to me that, like, whoa, if you have a ratio where people are producing 20 hours of engaging enough entertainment experience that they're not going to the movie because of it, and they're producing it for a fraction of the movie, but it is occupying their life 10 times more of their leisure time than the movie, we need to really start paying attention to this medium.
Yeah.
And so I was looking at it, in a slightly different way than a lot of other people were, that was like, I want to build cool games. And I was like, I really want to figure out what's going on here, so socially, technologically, and in its full potential as an artistic, medium that's connecting people. And so I still was naive, fortunately I wasn't like these film directors that get involved and go, I'm going to direct the game. How many of those have been successful?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The big film directors come in and direct the game, they go nowhere, right? Because what I've told those guys is, because gaming is mastery. Game design is mastery of compromise. It is not mastery of being an auteur and demanding till you get the very last, request that you have, or you'll storm off the set. This is a very different medium, and it's largely programmer driven, and you're dealing with team art building. And so a very different sort of cultural hierarchy and flattening. Even though there's strong hierarchies in companies, it's very horizontal compared to Hollywood, where the director's God, and if you look at him wrong, you can be fired off the set. Yeah. And you can't talk to that star, and she needs her 60 bottles of Evian every 2 hours to wash her hair right. You don't have, these guys are used to that shit, right? And then they get into games, they're like, I want more performance. It's like, yeah,
a
right.
lot of Evian.
Yeah. So I think that's
more Evian than I would think one person would need within a 2 hour.
Yeah. Well,
but anyway, we will talk.
You haven't been on the set with Kate Beckinsale, then, yeah. So.
I have, but I didn't want to talk about it. We will talk more about you and what you do here in a little bit, but we really do have to say but first.
Lab notes. So my time spending games has been extremely limited. Part of my new tasks, I've become involved with the Play Mindcrack server. I'm doing some staff work there. And basically what that involves is Play Mindcrack is a mini-game server for Minecraft games, for mini games, and our good friend Robert Moran is behind designing the games, and the good fellows with the Minecraft group are heavily involved in this, including Good, and so it's had me really not playing much lately. However, I did manage to pick up Super Crate Box.
Oh my gosh, seriously?
Yeah.
You're just getting into that?
Yeah, I tried.
Get with the times, Wes.
So, and the sad thing is, I have learned that I am now terrible at deadly platformers. I sort of got a hint of it when I played Super Meat Boy. But I don't think I realized the full effect of it until Super Crate Box. I really think I'm too old for this genre. I mean, I got another hint of it with Isaac, with the Binding of Isaac, and I just need to give this whole genre of games up. Is
it possible that you were always terrible at them?
No, I refuse to believe that. However,
tell me one super hard platformer that you were good at.
Jumpman Jr. I don't know. It's been a while.
You can't name, like... Come on, Contra. Were you good at Contra?
I was okay at Contra.
So no. So you have never been good at this genre.
No, I don't believe that.
What about Blackthorn?
About what?
Oh, good one.
Blackthorn.
I never played that one.
That was the first Bungie IP. I mean, I'm sorry.
No.
The first Blizzard. Blizzard. My bad. Yeah, exactly. Blizzard.
But anyway, I also wonder. Like, I think I'm over the whole like Control Alt Arrow key thing too. Like,
oh, you're on PC.
Yeah.
Well, that explains it.
And I think maybe I might be better at these with a controller. Thank you, Lorne. Thank you. I think
You're welcome.
I'm glad you're with me on this. So yeah.
No, platforming on PC is hard. You know, I always thought it was not as fluid as on a controller. You know, but so I could see if you're only approaching it through a keyboard. Some understanding there. So
I'm just offering that up there for Spencer to ignore and not comment on.
Yeah.
So the next thing is, it was Christmas time, and Santa Claus brought my family Disney Infinity, which why are you?
I've heard that's like this is what I've heard. My one of my best friends who I play co-op games with, or I used to, before we both got married and had children. He got really excited about it, and he bought Disney Infinity and all of the like little whatever add-on cars and Disney figures, and he bought the whole thing, like $220 worth of stuff for his 7-year-old stepson. And then he got home and said, and he played it a little bit, and he told me something to the effect of, "This is what hell is like."
No, I won't go that far. The one thing that I'm a little disappointed by is that for you to play the individual characters in the game, you have to do them in their world. So if you're going to play Sully or Mike Wazowski, you have to do it in the Monsters Universe world. If you want to play Jack Sparrow or whatever, you have to do it in the Pirates of the Caribbean world, which I feel is. There might be some logical consistency there, but at the same time, I think they're missing out on a lot of fun. And I think there's something wrong with that whole idea that they need to revisit. There's also a sandbox kind of place where you can go and build, and I haven't dug into it that much, and I'm not into it that much yet, where you can have Captain Jack Sparrow and Jack Skellington walking around together. So I think there's some. I've been enjoying it. I was a little disappointed. It's not as kid friendly as one would think. My kids are 6 and 4, and I really feel like I have to walk my 6-year-old through it. I also feel like it is trying to be Skylanders, but it missed the simplicity of Skylanders. It missed the pure element of Skylanders, which is you can't screw anything up. You can't walk off cliffs and die in Skylanders. We also got, my daughter got Skylander Swap Force, and the kids are all about it, and they're not touching Infinity. So there you have it. I think Disney dropped a few balls on this one. You know, it's if you don't mind my commenting, I think it's interesting when you get into the big established brands. Like I feel for the designers in the position of trying to do something that really sticks with the audience and then would enable something new, like what you said. Why can I not share these guys in the same universe? Why does it have to be just in their universe? And if that were happening, which without knowing what was going on behind the scenes, I would think that was actually pretty heavily argued on the table, right? Yeah. That the designers would want to go in that direction because I think it's a natural. Yeah. And I think the audience thinks it's natural. And then they get into the complications of, and like I said, this isn't a behind-the-scenes story because I don't know, but I've seen how it works. And you get into the complications of all of the concerns around these enormously branded characters and all the different sponsors that they have on every different, cereal box and underwear label and whatever it is. And so they say, well, if, in Jack Sparrow's world, characters are actually getting, head cut off and there's monsters
monsters and this and that. And yet these other characters are coming more from the G label. And so, you know, we're getting really concerned of that. How would that play out in every possible scenario? You can just imagine, like it's like an onion that just keeps getting bigger.
Yeah, that's actually
more layer.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty good point. One other thing that I've noticed about the whole Disney Infinity thing, like I really enjoyed the crisp lines of everything the first time I started playing it. Like all the characters are very smooth. The figures are really pretty. I like the physical figures. They're not as gaudy.
The action, in the game or the physicals, because they've got a lot of physical product around.
Well, yeah. Well, you put the physical product onto the little platform, and I really like those little figures. They're awesome. And so out of game, like I feel like the Skylanders figures are a little gaudy and over the top, whereas in game they're very pretty and detailed. The outside the game, I think the Disney figures are very clean, smooth, and attractive, and inside the game they look a little last gen. And so,
do you know what tech they're on?
No. Okay. So, but anyway, and then the last thing is for New Year's Eve, I actually flew out to San Francisco and got to spend New Year's Eve in the This Week in Tech studios up in Petaluma. And I ran Artemis for them on New Year's Eve and watched them die really horrible deaths. And
thanks for the invite, by the way, jerk.
I totally would have invited you if...
You know you wouldn't. You were like, I'm too good for you.
But it was great watching, you know, Brian Brushwood and Leo Laporte and all those guys dying horribly trying to control a bridge. But anyway, so that was my week. What about you, Spencer? What have you been playing?
Man, I feel like I haven't podcasted in like 2 months, 3 months.
You haven't?
It's been a long time. So I've been playing a lot of stuff, but I'm just going to narrow it down to what I've been playing really in the last week. And that's really just one thing. I've been playing Guild Wars. I've been playing Guild Wars 2. I'm back on that horse pretty hard because I've been in a terrible mood because I'm living with my in-laws, and I don't want to play something
podcasting
new. No, they're not going to play. They're 80 years old. They're not going to listen to a podcast. No, I love them. I just don't want to live with them. Anyway, I've been in a bad mood, and when I'm in a bad mood, I don't want to play a game that I'm looking forward to. Because I'm just it's gonna be like, oh boy, I've been looking forward to this game, yay! Oh wow, this game's a piece of crap.
So you're tainting the mood.
Huh? Yeah, exactly. So instead, I've just been playing something that's very, very familiar and very, very kind of safe and boring, and
you can get in there and just beat on people with.
Yeah. I'm enjoying it a lot. And what they just announced is they're ending whatever the game's been running for how long now? I don't know.
Ooh, about a year and a half, right?
About a year and a half, and they're ending basically the first living world storyline. And that what?
What does that even mean?
I don't know, but apparently every single one of their events is all tied together into this one giant storyline, and the culmination of the storyline begins at the end of this month. And it's going to wrap everything up, and who knows what's coming after. It might be a expansion.
How many players are still on Guild Wars?
Quite a few. It's rocking.
I've got to say, like I go back to it very comfortably. It's such a pretty game. I enjoy the combat in it. I found the Christmas stuff to be a little obtuse, as well as
you use that word too much. You need to cut back.
Okay.
On the word obtuse.
Okay.
Get more acute with obtuse.
Thanks. I used the word inimitable today in reference to Lorne, so I figured that gets my vocabulary word for the day. But anyway, like I worry that the game is becoming a little insular, and that the events seem to be like very heavy player focused. Like some of the events are kind of hard to approach as a casual player, if that makes sense. Does it?
No,
Well, I think so.
I did. Well, I don't know. I disagree.
Okay.
You know,
But you're a hardcore player, right?
No, I'm really not. In fact, we have friends that are hardcore players, and I very much have been a drop-in, drop-out player. But you bring up your quest list, and there it is. You know what to do, where to go if you want to join in. So I don't know. I don't think it's been that big of a deal. For the Christmas stuff, what do? You go to the main city, and everyone that has a little candy over their head, a little peppermint candy over their head, you talk to, and it's the Christmas stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, how hard is that? So.
I'm just saying that I like, for instance, the first Halloween event had very solid breadcrumbs to everything, and I feel like while there might be peppermint candies above some people's heads, like you go and some guy's selling stuff for socks and for sweaters and you're like, oh, well, where do I get those? I don't feel the breadcrumbs are as successful right now, and I feel like the people who have been playing the game are able to follow the breadcrumbs now better than casual players. But anyway, regardless, this is a stupid point, and I should shut up.
Yeah. Yes, I agree.
You know, what's funny is the artists at Guild Wars, particularly at the production design level, right, are just unbelievable. You've got Daniel Doce and Ken. I don't want to mispronounce his last name, but yeah, you know who I mean. Ken Kutagi. I want to say Kutagi, but I know I'm butchering it. Anyway, but through the years, the pre-production art coming out of that camp has been unbelievable, and I know because I've just been involved with judging all these different things for different annuals on like best of digital art and things like that. Knowing Daniel, knowing some of the guys up there, and he is like this is just sort of some backdrop on that property, but he is really like a commandant of the art department. Daniel Doce is just Eastern European descent, really like he couldn't do better. And those guys just have totally admired him through the years because he's really helped nurture them into just incredible artists. But for me, I've always been waiting like, okay, man, I see that awesome production design. I want to see that in the game. And, so I'm still kind of waiting for...
I feel like they did that with Guild Wars 2 to a certain extent. Not to the great extent that I would like to see, but they did, a lot of
got closer.
Yeah, a lot of the cursor stuff is like brush strokes, and it's kind of got this really cool vibe to it, but it's closer than Guild Wars 1 was, certainly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
I mean, I'm personally amazed by the clothing in the game. I feel like they took they really put a lot of work into having a very unique clothing options for each individual class. I know that stuff my Mesmer has gotten stuck with, it has been like beyond anything I've seen in a lot of other games, and I've been really impressed with the artwork in that game.
But anyway, I have been really enjoying my return. I've been doing the dailies every day. I've been playing with Random Inuyasha. I got her into it, and we're playing about every Sunday. And then I've got a character I'm playing by myself, and in the last 3 weeks, I've got to level 35 or something, and cleared 25% of the map. So I'm clearly playing too much. And that's
exactly.
And
that's part of why I don't go into the MMOs, because I know I'm just going to get slaughtered on time. It's sometimes
I've been doing this, and I've only got an hour and a half to play a day. So clearly I'm not killing myself. It's just it's what I've been playing. I've got some time to play. What should I play? Guild Wars 2. Now, do it.
Yeah, but it's like if you're dealing, don't use the goods. It's kind of like for games, because everyone, most of the guys in development, they're really hardcore. They're in this constant battle between anyone who lives with them, the amount that they're already working, and then how much they're playing in games, right? Yeah. So it's this totally dysfunctional relationship. And, it just goes to, this is for me, I'm playing most of the games that I'm experiencing today. And I know this sounds really weak and some people want to crucify me for it, but I'm actually checking it out on YouTube, because I can get a much faster idea without the addiction spell. you know, and I'm just as susceptible as the next guy. So if I go, oh yeah, I'll try the game, and then I pop in a disc or I download and I'm actually interactively in there, I'm stuck. You know, it's like crack. I mean, I'm just stuck. You know, it's like, oh shit, why did I do that? Here goes X
So have you ever?
hours.
Do you think you have ever been addicted to an MMO? And will you name it?
No, the MMOs. I was just like, no, those are hard drugs. You know, I'm staying away. You know, because I know what's going to happen.
You're like, no, thank you, sir.
But yeah, everyone was trying to get me in there. Like, dude, man, you got to get in there with us. I'm like, look at you. You know, look at you. You know, you're telling me just look at me, man. You're getting no sleep. You know.
I'm still bitter about EverQuest because it destroyed my first really good D&D group. So
now, see, you know, that was EverQuest was really emerging, you know, as Odyssey was releasing and as Exodus was happening. So we were watching, you know, I was watching some of these guys selling their characters for like $1,500, you know, and that was changing the whole possibility. But you know, it's a struggle, and myself, I get so into it, you know, which is why actually my favorite genre still tends to be arcade, personally, because I can get into it in a quick spell and then get out before I've like screwed up my life in some way. And, you know, piss someone off, missed a meeting,
thing you know,
got not got enough sleep.
You know, you're on the street corner, getting quarters to play in the store.
Exactly. Spare some change for the high score. Yeah.
So the other thing that I am doing, and I'm not much of a New Year's resolution person. I'm not playing a New Year's resolution. But I am limiting myself to 3 new game purchases in the year of 2014.
Wait,
the whole year?
The whole year.
Well, how many used games?
No. I don't generally do used games, so no.
Really?
Games.
Am I smelling a loophole there?
There is a loophole, and that is expansions for games that I already own are fine.
How many expansions are coming out this year?
I don't know. I haven't paid attention.
It's probably 2 dozen. You know.
I mean, I have so many.
Yes.
Sorry, you're gonna have to bleep this. So many games that it just has to be done. You know, I have to take a stand against the game list. I mean, it's gotten to the point where I have to, like, everyone's like, hey, how are you ever going to play all of those games on your Steam list? And I'm like, I look at it like a museum. Some of the games are in the back room where the public can't go.
Yeah. It's funny because, you know, the Steam list is like the new bucket list, right? You know, so many people are finding out that they bought the game twice. Like they bought it one weekend on a sale, and a year later they had never realized that they bought it. They forgot, they never played it, and then they see it on sale again. They buy it again. I've seen that happen a number of times.
Just for some reference, Lorne. Spencer owns 1,093 Steam games, 55% of which are totally unplayed.
Really? Yeah,
yes.
That's a bad average. Yeah.
Now,
so this is why you're in the in-laws house.
That's not entirely fair because I have had my Steam account for 10 years and they only started tracking the game playing like 3 years ago. So.
Right. And I, in comparison, I own 265 games, but 50% of them are unplayed as well. Now, my defense is that a lot of the games I own, I got with Humble Bundles, right? Mm-hmm. So, like, you know, when you get 10 games at a stretch, you know, that you really only wanted to play 1 or 2 of them. Okay, so.
Right.
I have been known to buy games aspirationally.
Yeah?
Like,
see, for me, it's...
I'm going to play Europa Universalis 4 someday. It's going to happen.
You know, and I have an entirely different ratio. Mine is almost every game I've ever bought, I've played. You know, how much hours, you know, not through certainly, but so it's a different frugalness. You know, I've always felt like that 60. I mean, first of all, you know, when it was $60 purchases, it was like, oh my God, I was totally frugal. And then as time goes on, you know, especially with mobile and stuff, there's almost nothing that I'll actually download and buy that I won't give a decent session on. But I buy a lot less because I'm trying to experience first on YouTube. You know, so I don't get hooked.
When I was like you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Lauren, have you been playing anything lately?
You know, I've been playing mostly mobile games. The game that I think is phenomenal that I've been playing, which was a total surprise on PS4, is Resogun. And I don't know if you've seen that, but Resogun is really... So check that game out. You know, if you want, if you look at, I mean, to me, it epitomizes a super clean, brilliant, concise design, implementation, lighting. It's basically Defender in the round, you know, like on the classic Defender arcade. So it's very arcade, but the effects, I mean, to me, it's very clear that there's a very tight synergy between who's ever doing the effects programming and who's ever doing art, an unusually good relationship there, synergistic relationship, and it shows because the effects in this game, you just look on YouTube and the effects are pretty phenomenal. A lot of particles, very concise, taking advantage of you know, of the platform quite well in an arcade way. So that one I always loved arcade. I love games where I can get in, get a quick shot, and get out, which is odd because Oddworld wasn't really that way. It was aiming for a different target. But for myself, you know, playing spells in gaming, I either want that great story that, you know, is fun to play, or the real pub and play, you know, as the Brits would call it, you know, where you're in and out fast on the arcade style games. But Resogun is pretty wild. The other one I've been having a lot of fun with is I think it's called Zombie GP. Is that it? GP Gun. It's you know what? I'll find out real quick. It's like you have a drone shooting zombies. YouTube, so yeah.
On a side note, while you're looking that up, I have started poking around with one other thing. I've started poking around with Ingress. That's the GPS game where you know you have to go around town and attack these portals in various places around town. And I've been in since the beta, and I haven't really poked around with it all that much because I don't know, it just seemed weird, and I only had one portal near me. But evidently the new year like brought all kinds of new portals around, and so I'm like driving around and I turned it on. I'm like, wait, there's a portal there, and I started going around and doing stuff, but my town is so totally controlled but the opposite faction that everything I did just got crushed almost within a day. So I don't know how long I'm going to stick with it, but anyway.
Yeah, so this is, you know, like, so depending on frequency, right? Like if you're in MMOs or if you're in real, you know, clan-related group gaming, then time away is really a penalty, right? You know, where you feel. And so, again, it's that time commitment. And part of what I've been studying and seeking is I'm looking for the patterns that are getting more fluid between like PC and PC and mobile. And one of the great things I think is happening on mobile is just that it's really forcing a simpler language for gameplay. You know, I mean, just touching and swiping is you know, forcing that at his UX experience right away. But as a result, you're also seeing these very interesting, fast level progression type of games coming out. One that I've been playing is Sniper S, which is really hilarious. You know, you're basically a hitman as a sniper, and your missions are just seconds long. So it's something where, again, you have a really short burst. It's like Stickman Figure that you're doing headshots with, and Stickman Theater that you're doing headshots on. It's kind of funny. And the other is the one I was mentioning, Zombie GS, so I'm paying more attention to, I'm looking for ways that simplicity is staying engaging, where, you know, even old, today I say old, but, you know, classically proving shooting models are actually coming up in games that are on touchscreen. Like, for instance, and I don't mean to get our theme off track, but, you know, been spending a lot of time on Stranger HD, the mobile version, which we're coming out with in a few months on iOS and on you know, tablets and Android and all that, on a very wide variety. But if you can imagine, if you played Stranger, Oddworld Stranger's Wrath, there was a lot going on with the controls. There was a lot of things you do with your character, and but so there was a lot of disciplines that we were still focusing in on, just nailing that down to making that as enjoyable an experience on a touchscreen, which is, I wasn't so sure how that would work out, but in looking at a lot of games out there and trying to feel all the best of how have people done a first-person shooter well on a mobile game, and you wind up with a very short list there. And each of those, you tend to have a few dings on, well, they could have done this, that was better, this. So we tried to learn from that. That's been a lot of my experience in the gaming recently, is trying to look at who's done things better, who's done things right with simpler interfaces, but still allows, a complicated shooting experience to happen. And, so it goes to some of these games I'm talking about. And then looking at the bad lessons too. Personally, I felt like when I was playing Rage, I was like, whoa, what's going on with this rail? I don't know if you did Rage on mobile, it's Rage.
No.
But it just seemed a totally different shift. There's a lot of discovery in the interface process that still is being learned between console gamers, PC gamers, and mobile gamers. And so a lot of that space of those learns is something, as a designer, I've been looking at. As a player, like I said, to me it's all like crack, and I'm trying not to use too much. But,
That's awesome.
But yeah,
what happens when it's time to start
space.
playtesting one of your games? Do you just tell your testers to put it on YouTube so you can watch?
No, I think they wish it were that way. What I try to do first is I'd be like, okay, when are we past the headache point? Where I feel like a tester. Every tester you've ever talked to thought he was going to have a good job when he first signed up. Then he realized, oh, I get to play the game only when it doesn't work, And then they find out what a terrible job it is. Testers is miserable. Those guys are, it's a tough job, man, because it's not the good game that you're playing. It's the broken game that you're trying to play. And so just imagine that as a full-time job, So it's bad enough when you've got bugs, right? But now your job is full-time playing buggy games. So it's no easy spell. So what I try to do is get it depends on what phase of development. Like in the case of New and Tasty that we're building now, which is a redo of Abe's Odyssey on Unity technology. So it's actually, we tried to stay with the game as it was, but bring it up so we tried to remain classic, but put it on new technology, 3D dynamic lighting, 3D animation, smoother, tighter, better backgrounds in the living world, but trying not to redo the script, like saying, if you played that game here, we've redone it for the 21st century, but without changing the design. So it's kind of a classic revisit, which is interesting. And we felt like it should have happened on other titles that way, instead of really trying to just do a brand new game out of it. But in doing that, it's been interesting to see, over time, the choices that have been made. And right now, because basically it's mapped out, they know, they have an exact template of how it's supposed to play. Now it's supposed to play better. I don't have to go through as you are when you're developing new mechanics. And, like if you're doing, whether it's saving Dawkins or getting, smooth animation, those are things where at least there's enough of a template. I'm not as in the trench these days, like the team is competent. They're in another country, which is kind of wonderful on one hand.
It's like living with your in-laws.
No, that's like having your own company. But having them offset is nice, because I think partially they try harder. You communicate less, but you try to make it more dense and valuable. Yeah. But really, I'm saying get it far enough along where I'm not, basically doing your basic bug tests. You guys can figure that out. Yeah. So my ramping speeds up and increases in time on hands-on controls as we get closer to shipping usually. And, that's how it's been going lately. So I can't complain about that. It's when you're building new stuff, like when we started building Stranger's Wrath, or, even Munch's Odyssey as its own journey for us, then it gets really complicated. I mean, you're in there every day, but you're trying to do things that you just haven't felt well done before, if they've been done at all, so like live ammo. As an example, no one believes it's going to work when you're building it, which is half of your battle. They're just like, this makes no sense. I'm like, no, it makes total sense, but we got to get it to work first before it's actually going to feel good. And so then you're in there, every day, all throughout the course of the development. In the course I've been on the last few years, it's more towards the back end, and just making sure the seal quality is there and all. But, Jaw's been great, so I can't complain.
Eureka! Ow! Okay, so one interesting thing that's been going on this past week is that game companies around the globe have been getting hit really, really hard with a bunch of DDoS attacks. And there's a group called Dirt Trolling that has actually changed how they're doing DDoS attacks. They've been using an NTP attack, and I'll provide a link to that if anybody's curious about the details about it. But I think what strikes me the most is it seems kind of silly to attack game companies. It's kind of like, throwing poison in your own well. I feel like a lot of these trolls are mainly doing it to vandalize the other people playing games. They're not vandalizing the companies themselves. They're vandalizing the people who are trying to play the games that these companies have sold.
All they want is the biggest billboard to put their names on. That's all they care about.
Yeah.
I don't even want to talk about this. This is, all it does is give more people impetus to do it. Not like, we're this huge, hacker destination for people to listen to, but that's what it is. It's, what can I take down that will make the most people angry, then they'll know that I exist because I'm pathetic.
And I'm amazed people are doing that today. To that degree, casually. I can understand it. It's a group that used to be KGB, and now they're unemployed, and they're going after 60 million credit card numbers. Understandable, right? Yeah. But someone casually just being disruptive like that in a place where internet security is having greater and greater penalties, whether we agree with where all that's going or not. The reality is people are going to jail for this stuff. Yeah. And it just seems crazy that people are casually doing it. That's a lot to risk of your life.
Yeah. Well, and it just seems so pointless too. It's like taking your own well and putting poison in it. I wonder why they're not. If they've got all this stuff, why don't it seems like a waste of resources, first off. If I had 20,000 zombie computers around the globe, why would I pick on an entertainment company? Why don't I do something that, why don't I take down a bank, or something that I consider to be actually hurting the world,
It's just the biggest bridge for them to spray their paint on.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
You find out it's Fox. Fox TV is contracting Chinese hackers to shut down gaming companies.
And in helping set up the Play Minecraft servers, I found out about the DDoS protection that they have to pay for. They subscribe to DDoS protection. And I wondered, is this like a mafia thing? I need for something to happen to your network. So why do you pay us some protection? Could the DDoS people that are trying to sell the protection maybe have something to do with the actual DDoSing that's going on?
Yes. You gotta have some evidence for that.
I'm just saying.
But the idea is, those are some nice packets you got there. It'd be a shame if someone were to set fire to them. That's pretty funny. But
when this window replacement business is slow, why don't you go generate some more customers?
So the next story I have here: Creative Assembly, makers of the Total War games, have announced that they are doing the next Alien game, which is going to be a survival horror game called Alien Isolation, and every single person I've seen discussing it has mentioned how much of a disappointment Colonial Marines was.
Do we even have to talk about Colonial Marines? Well, you bringing this up to needle me.
Yeah,
I know you will.
You bought it on release, didn't you? You played full price for that, didn't you?
And for a friend, but let's not talk about what I've done.
So my question is
wouldn't that be a shame if that was one of my 3 games this year?
Yes.
One of my 3 games was a Colonial Marines. Oh my god.
Well, the thing that's interesting to me is even though I think everybody who buys the game will know that another company made the other game, how much do you think that the franchise has been hurt by Colonial Marines coming out?
Not at all.
Really?
Really?
Frankly, I'm still waiting for a great one, a great Aliens game.
Yeah. Okay, well, that was a short discussion.
I mean, do you think? No, I mean, just real quick, which do you think hurt aliens more? The Colonial Marines game that everyone like 30 people played it and it was terrible. The reviewers all trashed it and then everyone forgot about, or Aliens versus Predator that was just awful and everybody saw. Which one do you think hurt aliens more?
I don't know. I don't know the answer. I think both of them do. I don't think many people have any faith that there will be a good Alien game come out because of...
And that's just insane, right? I mean, talk about a property that's perfect for gaming.
Yeah.
And yet we haven't managed to really get it yet.
Yeah.
I mean, but it is just ideal. I mean, if someone said, Lorne, would you be interested in directing an Aliens game? I'd want to know, well, what's the studio involvement? First question, right? But then it'd be like, of course I would entertain that because it hasn't even been tapped to what its possibility is.
Yeah.
Alien 3 on the Game Boy was pretty good. Come on. I don't know that. I have no idea.
So the next thing I wanted to talk about, PlayStation Now has been announced, and they're going to be allowing streamed games for a subscription fee. And I found that really funny, considering they're pushing this next gen hardware and then saying we're not going to run the game on your next gen hardware. And I guess that, maybe because they're talking about how PlayStation Now will be available on 2014 Bravia TVs.
What is PlayStation Now?
It's going to be a subscription service, and they'll have games that are streamed to your consoles. Basically, what was it, On Live? Was that what it was?
Oh, okay.
Well, that was a hardware solution, right?
Right.
Whereas this is Dave Perry's Gaikai, really.
What do you mean by that?
Right.
So Dave Perry started a company called Gaikai, which was really true hardware-less cloud streaming, real-time streaming of gameplay off of servers.
And
it was pretty ahead of its time.
To this?
Well, it disappeared for, I think it was $417 million, that Sony paid for it.
Oh,
yeah. So it was, it was working. I mean, we were actually running some tests on it in a different venture. And Dave was, if you've ever seen him talk on Gaikai, some pretty smart stuff. He was ahead of the curve. And I think it was very smart that Sony bought it. But what I think is happening now is that, to quickly comment on PS Now, because they just announced yesterday, right? He just came out with that announcement yesterday.
Yes.
Or the day before, yeah. So this is what's going to basically allow your PS4 experience to stream through your Vita.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right now, what does that do, right? And this is something I've known ever since the first PS4 announcement in New York over a year ago when we were there. I've known that the audience and the press doesn't necessarily understand yet because Gaikai was so revolutionary new and so still into a beta audience that people still didn't really get what it meant. But I think what it means in the short term is different things. It's something that's going to roll out in different ways. But just imagine that, where you were playing on your PS4, you could go up into your bedroom. I think right now it's limited by Wi-Fi out of the same IP address. Eventually, my suspicion is that it'll be anywhere where the Wi-Fi connection is high enough bandwidth. Yeah. You could be streaming your PS4 quality experience to your Vita in real time.
Well,
and that's the real change.
That is the only reason why I want a PS4. Honestly.
Really?
Yeah, honestly.
Wow.
My TV time is so limited because of my child.
Yeah. Agreed. Well, and
that's what's happening, right? Is that we have a big shift to mobile happening anyway, but we're finding that it's just basically people are at the desktop for less hours a day.
Yeah.
In this modern world we're living in.
Well,
especially as they don't have to be there for email.
One thing that I did read in the article is that because my first response was, okay, we've got a PS4 and we're going to stream games to it. That seems stupid. You've got all this accelerated hardware. Why would you necessarily want to remove the hardware from the component? And then I read about the Bravia and the Vita handhelds being able to do it as well. But it's also going to require a 5 meg pipe, which is pretty significant. And it makes me like, for some reason, and I could be totally just misreading this because I'm, only superficially interested in this. But it seems like there's a lot of overhead requirements that make the actual advancement kind of like who's going to use this and who's going to need it? It feels kind of Steam OS-y to me.
Well, it's going to be, it'll need a 5 meg pipe to come in and out of your house if you're gonna stream it outside. Yeah. If I want to play, some PS4 game in bed after everyone else is in bed and I want to play it in my Vita, all I need is a good, network. That's all I need.
Well, but the PlayStation Now thing is more specifically what I'm talking about, which allows you to stream from remote computers.
I just thought you wanted to talk about the size of my pipe. I'm so bad.
Okay, so we'll wind up the news. I'm just going to post a couple of things here. The GDC award nominations and the Independent Game Festival finalists were listed. The only thing that kind of caught me kind of fancifully was, we had Steve Gaynor on last week, and Gone Home ended up in the GDC Game of the Year nominations, along with Grand Theft Auto 5, The Last of Us, Super Mario 3D, and Tomb Raider. So all these huge production value games, and then Gone Home, which I thought was pretty fascinating. And then in the Independent Game Festival nominations, there's a lot of really excellent things. Device 6 got mentioned, which came up a couple of weeks, like three guests ago. I can't remember who exactly brought it up. But you've got, I'll provide a link in the show notes to this, but there's a lot of really great trailers. These independent companies are putting together some fantastic trailers, like for Jazz Punk and for Dominique Pamplemousse in It's All Over Once the Fat Lady Sings. And I recommend everyone go and check out these amazing independent games and see why they're nominated. Inspiration. So Lorne, like I saw in an interview one time, you were talking about how you wanted to make more adult games, and when you compare, your latter releases to your early releases, they seem a lot dark, and people are always like, oh, the games got darker, and you're like, well, the first games were dark compared to what came out at the beginning. Like, now that all these incredibly dark games are coming out now, how deep are you going to go?
That's a good question, and I'm actually wrestling with it. And it's not like I have a budget, so the wrestling is minimal. But I'm looking at Fangus Clot, and that's a game where as I get very excited about what I'm thinking about for the mechanics and all. And I want to build in, for this character, and I don't want to make the mistake that this is in production, right? This is just on a high concept table still.
You heard it here first, people.
It is not in production, damn it. But it's one that I'm wrestling with a lot at a design level, and I have a lot of what I feel is, right for it, and then I'm not sure how intense that gets at an emotional level, because I really want a deeper emotional bonding with the character and a more intense world and the struggles they're going through. And this one amped it up quite a bit at some levels that we haven't explored yet in Oddworld. So I'd be wrong if I didn't say I was concerned about how that would ultimately take, but it feels right to design, and I'm not the kind of guy that approaches that stuff for the sake of violence or gratuitous or darkness. To me, it's all about messaging and great experiencing for people. On the surface, that it's a great experience, a simple story to follow. B, it's a whole nother level of subtext that people want to get into that. But C, and actually most importantly, is that it's a great playing experience, even at a superficial level. But this one would notch it up a bit, and I'd be lying if I didn't say I had reservations, and I'm wrestling with myself on how far to take it. And I feel like they're justified in relationship to the character. They're not, torturing people, things like that. But it gets, there's cases that get pretty heavy, and I think games are inevitably going to go there more intelligently, the way that like Full Metal Jacket did as a movie, or I'm going to Kubrick, but Clockwork Orange, right? Like, they were very smart, intelligent, incredible masterpieces, but at the same time, they did things that people weren't expecting yet, and So I'd be lying if I said I was totally confident that they're always, warm and fuzzy. And, you know, and I want to see more intensity. I think we're living in a more intense world today. I don't want to engage violence for the sake of that. But I do think, you know, we're all feeling this need for a good fight. Yeah. And, you know, and I'm not the one who's going to make, you know, Marines in Fallujah game. Yeah. But so I'd have more of a different view of the whole spectrum of what's going on out there and interpret that into, I mean, to me, making games and making stories is always about making modern myths, like things that are relevant to our time, not just for the sake of making money. You know, it's always a critical factor, but because they resonate deeper and they'll stay longer with people, and they might have more value in the individual who's experienced them's mind over time. You know, and Star Wars had that effect for me. Hobbit had that a lot of effect for the people at a storybook level. You know, certainly Animal Farm in 1984. You know, those I read those as a kid, and they never left my mind. I probably reference them weekly. So I've always been into the medium possibility. As you know, how can we make great playing gaming experiences? Because if we get away from that, forget it. Just get out of the business. Don't bother trying. But how do we make great playing experiences that try to break new ground, that try to engage us deeper the way that, you know, other forms of content have done at times, not just with our challenge and you know, addictive factor in terms of, you know, I'm challenging, I must succeed. Beyond that spectrum into, I really want to know what's happening. I really want to know what's going on with this guy. I really want to find out what happens and go through this journey with that character. And living in a more intense world today, you know, we got Guantanamo Bays and all kinds of things going on. I wanted to delve more into that type of territory. And I don't mean torture, but I meant in characters slowly losing their mind. Yeah. In a world that's, you know, making a lot of hardships on people.
Yeah.
No, I'm hearing all this, but I'm also thinking you started with a game that was that you played a character trying to save his race from extinction via being eaten.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a little not light fare, right? What I thought was, hey, you know,
I mean, it was hilarious.
Simpsons was, well, thank you. I mean, Simpsons was doing great, right? Like, if you wanted to watch relevant TV for a while, I mean, Simpsons was one of your only choices, right? Yeah. And so the writing was just extraordinary. You know, the animation was terrible, and the writing was extraordinary, and it just really made it. And if you wanted to have intelligent TV, you had to turn on The Simpsons, right? And so, you know, in games, we're dealing with most product. I mean, the indie space is very exciting because it's breaking a bit out of this, but most product is made for profit. I mean, and its primary goal, you know, just like food on the shelf. And so I still feel like there's a tremendous amount of room where the medium itself can really step it up in different directions. And I think you're seeing that more in the indie space now, because you just got smaller teams willing to take crazier chances to stand out. And, you know, so in that respect, it's a special time. The medium of devices, of possible places you could release something like that, is much wider and at a wider range of price points than it's been in the past. But, you know, it's still yet to be. It's still, in my opinion, it's still a baby medium, and I mean that not in for babies, but it's still really just it's in an early development. I mean, when we compare what games are going to be like in 20 years from now, we can't comprehend what games will be like in 20 years from now, just with the the curve of computing and what's going to happen 2.5 generations away. Yeah. So yeah.
Did you have anything, Spencer?
Nope.
Okay, my that was a very interesting topic, and I was listening so fully I didn't sit here and do my interview thing and figure out my next question. So one of the things I remember the most about when I first got Abe's Odyssey was two things. First off, there was this whole crystal clear kind of three-dimensionality to it. Like, you guys really worked hard, and it felt very crisp in an era where that kind of graphics was just not around. And the second thing I remember most was there was this curious, Oddworld was the proper name for it, because there was this curious weirdness to it that also kind of surrounded a very benign and kind basic gameplay. I mean, when you got those and kind of implemented them, were those the reactions that you were hoping for?
Somewhat, certainly, yes. And the reason was we spent, and this goes to part of why it was a 2.5D game. That was because at the time, just to address the graphics, at the time, everyone was rushing to 3D. And what we already understood was that no one was really going to be able to distinguish themselves with the little bit of 3D capability that was there. So it was kind of like this leveling playing field wherever all of a sudden, even people from previous 2D generations where they had great looking graphics stepped into 3D. And while in my opinion, the uninformed gaming audience at the time, which included a lot of the press, was saying, wow, great graphics. What they were really saying was, wow, 3D, shitty graphics, but 3D, you know? And we were like, no, man, those are graphics. And so we want great graphics and we want great animation as good as we can get. And so what we did was we pre-rendered everything in 3D, and then we used the power of the PlayStation. Instead of using its 3D power, we used it to, you know, play back all the bitmaps in this more, it looked 3D, but it played in a 2D way, and we were able to do that with bitmaps, which in many ways, you know, the lessons were coming early from Jordan Mechner, right, with Prince of Persia, just seeing how he rotoscoped, and then later Donkey Kong Country had just come out, and they were doing that in quite a good way, where they were pre-rendering 3D and using it as 2D bit sprites, and so that led to trying to capture as 3D a art-directed world as possible that you would never be able to do if you could only have 2,000 polygons in the scene. Right. So that was one in the gameplay experience. Two was I felt in games that they were really, and a number of the members on teams, we were like, we want to tighten up this whole menu, you know, and load times and seams of sounds between levels and all of these things. We want to get into a more seamless experience. You know, we were coming out of like Super Bowl commercials and visual effects and films and things where we were just like, you know, everything's got to be super polished, super tight and stitch in. And the systems, you know, were still challenged at how you wanted to cache in and out memory, how you wanted to get video to perfectly sync with a bitmap, even though the video is ending and a bitmap's beginning. And that was one of the tricks in Abe's Odyssey in the beginning. If you remember, you know, you come from the movie and all of a sudden you're in the game, and I've watched a number of people that were sitting there at the beginning of the game and they're like, whoa, I'm in the game, you know, and we were going for that little magic moment, and it was really painful, you know, because, you know, you had compression of bitmap and certain resolutions that bitmaps wanted to display at, and then you had compression of video and different resolutions that it wanted to display at. So it was one of those things where I was kind of unreasonable in the demand of making sure that it was really seamless and tight that way, and that we didn't have sounds being cut off, that we really minimized load screens as much as possible, that there was no dead moments overall as a continuous experience. And so we did put a lot of focus in that, and I'm glad, you know, thanks for pointing that out. And then we were just really trying to bring a very artistic touch to it, you know, that I remember some of the team was reading, and they were reading about what the guys on Myst had done, and there was some comments like from the artists at Myst. They go, you know, we didn't have to build a new candelabra for every room, but we just wanted to, and it made it cooler. You know? And I was like, oh, that's terrible for the budget, but you know, that's totally the right spirit. Yeah. And so there was a lot of that happening within the art team, in particular at Oddworld, and healthy competitions with one another. You know, if you look at Abe's Exodus, you really see Raymond Swanlin, for instance, and Mark Allen really going head to head, you know, producing new screens. And if you look at the screens, they were just like going home and modeling their own 3D and, you know, bringing it back for bitmap renders tomorrow. It was crazy stuff going on, but they were really invested in making something that they really wanted people that appreciated craftsmanship, you know, especially art craftsmanship, to really like, you know, and be appreciative of. And I think, you know, we did pretty well on that level. It was a lot of work. And it's funny you mentioned that, because even, you know, I was on the phone, you know, I'm on the phone daily with the UK on the new and tasty product, and we're talking about Abe's Odyssey. That's one of the things we were just going over was Abe was very tight. You know, the menus into game screens, all of that flowed very tight, and we need to make sure that happens here too.
Yeah.
And you know, as you're putting the final stitches together, and everyone's on board with, which is good. But thanks for noticing that.
So, and one other thing that kind of amazes me is when I went to your Wikipedia page, learning you did pretty much all the voices in everything. Was that something that, like, when you started, you know, making games, you're like, I want to do all the voices? I mean, or is this like a secret wish that you had for, you know, like when you were in the film industry, you're like, I want to do all the voices?
It was something I was just like being a clown, you know. Yeah. I mean, I was just such a clown, and so I was like, you know, imitating executives or anything. You know, is there any more profit for us? You know, whatever is going on, we just screw around with you know, cops, security, executives, you know, pawns, slaves, and was just always screwing around with voices. As a kid, I mean, as a baby, I was like a mockingbird. You know, my mom, it would just freak my mom out. And she worked in the hospital, you know, so she was like emergency room and shit. And I would have this whole repertoire. I mean, any siren out there, and I am not kidding, right? My voice cannot do this today, but any siren, whether it was out of London, ambulance, fire truck, police car, I had them nailed, like nailed, the whole frequency. It just freaked my mother out. You know, I was just a little baby, and I'd be like, you know, playing with my cars, and it would totally sound like, you know, accidents and cops were flowing in. And so I just always loved, you know, just what you can do with your voice. And then when we started making the games, what I realized was, we were going to be changing things a million times before we delivered. And the idea of contracting out, you know, agencies and things like that, you know, SAG actors, and then having to reschedule every time we figured out, you know, our gameplay strategy wasn't working and we hadn't planned on this or that voices being recorded, we said, well, why don't we just avoid all that and do it all ourselves? Yeah. And what I used to say to the team was, I was like, look, Jim Henson did it, we can do it too. You know, if you were going to run that puppet, Mr. Animator, you know, you get that mic in your voice too. Let's hear it. You know, and they'd be like, what? You know, I'd be like, get in the booth. And some of these guys really stepped up, you know, so all the voices we ever did were always in-house. And for me, it was just a simple way to make sure that no matter how many times we blew the budget or had to cut this or that, change the dialogue, you know, we could always do it without increasing costs with just the overhead staff. So that was one of the things. And the other was that it just seemed fun, you know, and I was a huge fan of Jim Henson and seeing what they were doing. And when I watched, if you've ever watched, you know, the making of any Muppets or Sesame Street, those people just always seemed like they were having fun. And the truth is, once we got in the sound booth, you know, making games is brutally hard, right? And making computer graphics was brutally hard, and making visual effects is brutally hard. But when you got in the voice and you could do something in a sound booth, you could actually have people laughing just because you said some shit funny, you know? Yeah. And so it was like, wow, it didn't take a whole production in 2 months to get a laugh. You know, this is great. So we started getting this instant gratification relationship to it. Yeah. And then we've kept that tradition to this day. Okay. What we did now is, I'm sorry, I'm overrunning my time.
That's all right. That's all right. You're having a great time, and I appreciate it. We'll go ahead and start winding down. I do have some calls.
Can I ask one question, just real quick? It's a question I want to start asking people who were developing console games around this time. Lorne, why didn't you save the Dreamcast?
You know, it's funny you say that, because Bernie Stoller was he went over to run it, right? So he left Sony, and we were supposed to go to Sony even before we went to GT. But quite honestly, the Japanese contingency didn't really understand Abe. You know, I don't know why. And but they didn't necessarily understand Abe, and he wanted to sign Abe up as first party. And we were about to do a deal, and then he goes, you got to do a deal with GT. I'm leaving. I'm going to run Sega. I'm going to do their new machine. And then he was actually, you know, Bernie's like a pillar in the history of the business. But and then he was actually saying, you know, come on over and do this. And I was like, it's not doing the real-time dynamic lighting that I want, you know. And that's what I was really looking for. Was like, where's that next dynamic lighting? Yeah. And then the Xbox got closer to it, even though we didn't take full advantage of it because of the type of game we built. But
you know what? Way to avoid the actual question there.
Yeah.
Way to avoid the actual. You didn't answer why you didn't save. Anyway.
All you got to do is go back and look at my wiki again, and I think it'll answer that. It's like many feats, but minimal successes in different ways. But I think it would have needed a lot more help than I could have brought at the time. So
I'm going to say that we got some great calls and some great messages this week, and I really would love to wind them out, but I'm also really, I don't want us to go to an hour and a half. So I'll go ahead and save these for next week, and we'll do that. Lorne, it was a real pleasure to have you on. When I found out that you were available, I was very excited, and I had no fear mentioning you to Spencer and knowing he would be excited as well. And I appreciate all your hard work.
He's terrified of my approbation. So.
Well, hey, it's great. Thanks for having me, Wes and Spencer. And I like talking to Alabama. I'm curious. I'd like to stop in sometime.
Okay, that sounds great.
All right. Hey, thanks, guys.
No problem. Have a great night, chat room. It was a pleasure, and take care.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Core Elements, exploring gaming one element at a time, a listener-supported podcast. See the show notes or get more information at coreelementshow.com or leave us a voicemail at 256-763-0455.